What's up, guys? It's Dakota from Broad Street CrossFit. I want to talk about the air squat today. The air squat is probably the most fundamental movement that we do in the gym. It's also, in my opinion, the most important exercise that you could do. If you could do any exercise, I would suggest air squatting, and air squatting in the correct way. The cool thing about the air squat is as we try to do it with good technique, it will expose certain setbacks or flaws in our mobility as well as motor control, and then we address them, and it'll actually improve our quality of life just by improving our air squats. That's a beautiful thing. So the basics of the air squat: we're gonna have our feet about shoulder width, right under the shoulders. People have a tendency to go wider, especially powerlifters when they do squats. It's a style for a purpose, but for a healthy squat, for the squat that I like to teach, I like it to be shoulder width. I want to turn the toes out either slightly or keep them straight. I don't want my feet to be out like this. I would say the most turn that I'm like okay with would be like that. Kind of like if I close my eyes and I pick my feet up and then I open them up, that's where I'm at. If I could learn to build with a straight foot, cool, that's cool too. I like that just because of the torque or the tension that it allows in the hip. So when I start my squat, the first thing I'm gonna do is initiate by sending the butt backwards. I'm also gonna stand up nice and tall at the top. I don't wanna be hinged when I start, or like if I'm doing a back squat, I don't wanna have bent legs and then start, because I've already loaded the quads and I haven't loaded the hamstrings, and it's gonna make it really hard to recruit the hamstrings into this squat. So I'm gonna stand up nice and tall, lock my hip joint out, my knee joint out, squeezing my butt, abs tight, squeezing my quads as well. And then I'm gonna initiate the squat by sending the butt back, or hinging at the hips. After I do that, the next step is to bend the knees. I like to keep my chest upright in an air squat by throwing my arms up, lowering as low as I can. Ideally, the butt is below the knee at the bottom, full depth, keeping my abs tight, feet flat, and then I'm gonna drive up to a full stand where everything locks out again like it was in the beginning. After sending the butt back in the squat, the second most important thing of the squat is that we're gonna drive our knees out as hard as we can. A metaphor for that would be like a cowboy that rode too much. We want our knees to stay stacked right over our foot the entirety of the squat. Especially if we put load on our back, or in air squats, if we're doing a lot of volume of air squats. Doing a lot of squats with our knees valgus or turned inward puts shear forces on the ligaments of the knee, and it can create an injury to one of them. And we want to really avoid that at all costs. I would say a squat with valgus knees is less good, even if it's full depth, than a shallow knees out air squat. And so we have to try to master that, and one of the ways that we're gonna do that is by creating a fake arch with our foot. We're gonna drive our toes into the ground, and we're gonna kind of like pull up the middle of our foot and put the weight towards the outside of our foot right here. My toe is driving into the ground, and the middle of my foot is kind of coming up like this. A good example of that would be if you get like a little rock in your shoe and you can't take your shoe off and you're walking, and it's in the middle of your foot. You kind of like put it in the middle of your foot, and then you cup your foot so that you don't stand on it when you walk. That driving out of the knees is going to keep our knees safe, and also it's going to provide a lot of torque in the hips so that there's no slack. And so any force that we're putting upward is going to go upwards, which is cool. If our knees are kind of wobbling the whole time, we're losing force throughout this entirety of this lift. So butt back, drive the knees out as I'm bending them. Lower, staying nice and flat-footed, chest up, looking straight, abs engaged. I'm flexing, but I'm still able to talk, and then full stand at the top. So there's a few things that you're gonna notice as you're trying to achieve this perfect air squat. There's a few faults that can happen. One of them is the knees caving in. That's gonna be something right away, really scary, we need to fix. People have a tendency, when they go really wide, even if they drive the knees out, it's hard to keep the knees stacked over the foot. If you look here, my kneecap is kind of on the inside. If I pull it in, now I can get my kneecap out. So even if I'm slightly wide, it can get a little sketchy. Another thing that we notice is when people go down in a squat, they have a tough time keeping their chest up. Now this can be due to motor control, and I just have to get used to pulling that chest up, so we can cue that first, like, hey, pull your chest up. But if our ankle dorsiflexion is really bad, you're gonna notice it pitches us forward because we can't bend at the ankle here. So we need to have good dorsiflexion in order for us to be able to get into that low upright squat. So there's a few ways that we can fix that. One of them is, this is a simple one of many, but we put the band around an upright. We bring the band down to the bottom. We put the band around our foot, right over our ankle. We come out into tension, and then we stretch by pulling the knee past the foot or the toe, or really just putting as much tension, getting our knee forward as far as we can with the foot flat the entire time. We don't want to come up on the toes. That relieves the stretch. And we just kind of sit there, and it's a stretch, and we're just trying to improve this dorsiflexion. A lot of times when people hear knee past the foot, they get a little bit of a warning sign because they're like, oh, that's not supposed to happen, which is true. I'll go over that. But we're not loaded really, so it's not too big of a deal. Our knee can move this way. It's just when we put load on us, we don't, heavier weights, we don't really want the knee to ever track past the toes too much. I would suggest if you're gonna do that ankle dorsiflexion stretch, do it for a long time. Try to accumulate 2+ minutes on each side. And a way that you can actually check your ankle dorsiflexion would be, you come over to a wall, you keep your foot flat, and let's say my right is the bad foot. I'm gonna put all the weight on my right, keeping my foot flat, and then try to bring my knee to the wall. If I achieve it without bringing my heel up, I'll go even further, and go in like little increments until ultimately my heel comes up off the ground. If so, I'll go right back to the last time I successfully got my knee forward with my foot flat, take my other foot and match it, and then I'll try that too and see if with my good foot, if it's one or the other, I can achieve that dorsiflexion. Same dorsiflexion. See, we never really want a difference in between feet. We always want a balance, because anytime we're doing like a double leg thing, where we're using both legs or both arms at once, if there's an issue in mobility in one and not in the other, the compensation can create an injury over time. Also, our form won't be great, so that can create an injury as well. Other things we see in the squat, when people go down, they might even stay as upright as possible, and they go down and they can't get any lower than, say, here. And what happens is the hip joint has a range of motion. Like when we're kids, babies, you can see they can play like this all day long because their hip joint, the range of motion is completely clear and their hip is open. Over time, scar tissue and just tissue in general starts to encroach on the joint, and it starts to pretty much close that joint off, and so we have to open it up. If we go through life just sitting on a couch where it's only like, say, this high, then we never get lower in that range of motion. We won't have ability in that range of motion, and over time, our body will change. And that's why as we get older, it's hard for us to bend. When we go to pick something up, we can't really bend our legs. So a good way to fix that would be by putting the band around the upright again, taking a band, I would like it about 1 foot off the ground, pulling it up high into your hip. Just make sure, guys, we don't trap anything in there. All right, coming out where I have tension, and this is pulling on the hip, and then I'm gonna drop the elbow. I can do static holds like this for a little bit. Another thing I can do is put my hands on the ground and keep them on the ground on both sides and floss the hip by driving both legs straight and then coming back down to that lunge. I can also stretch away from the foot, dropping the chest down. And all this stuff is gonna open the range of motion in the hip. Just make sure whatever you do to one side, if you're about to lift and using it as a prep, do it to the other side. And if you're using it as a tool to gain hip mobility, try to accumulate a lot of time in that stretch. A lot of issues when we do stuff and they don't necessarily work for stretching is we either don't test to see if it works, or we just do like way too short. Like people will have that ankle thing and they'll be like, all right, and they'll jump in the band for 15 seconds, come out. It's just not enough to actually make any of a difference in the range of motion. One thing I notice when we're doing squats in general for CrossFit, because we do wall balls, Olympic lifts, is we really need to focus on staying upright. And that's the beauty of the more narrow shoulder width squat as opposed to the powerlifting, a little bit wider squat. The beauty is that it transfers over to things like wall balls, where we have to stay really upright in order to hit the target. And if we're a little too wide, every time we go down, the chest drops a little bit, the knees cave a little bit, and it makes it a lot harder. Also, we can get a bit of a reflex out of Olympic lifts, which is more of an advanced idea, but something to think think about the stretch reflex where, say we catch a lift, we bottom out, we can drive right up with that momentum as the muscles stretch and have that reflex. Overhead squats is a squat that really requires us to stay super upright. Front squats are a squat that requires us to stay super upright. Back squats, not so much, but I like to practice my back squats super upright so that it transfers. As opposed to having multiple squats, I like to kind of just stick with one so that it transfers and I get practice and everything. Although it's never wrong to have a lot of tools in your toolbox and to switch from certain styles consciously once in a while so that you get the different effects. All right, let me know if that helps you guys. Air squat, super important. If you can't air squat perfectly, just all the way down, all the way up. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but you really need to fix it, okay? It's a huge thing for health, not just if you're a CrossFitter, just in general. As a person, achieve a really good air squat and so many things, so many benefits are gonna happen outside of the fact that you can air squat correctly. All right, guys, I hope that helps. I'll see you at the box.